Hello and welcome along to the Weather Studio Live. It's 1 o'clock, it's Tuesday. We are broadcasting live from the Met Office. I'm Alex Deakin.
And I'm Aidan McGiven. Coming up this week, we're looking back at Storm Erik of last week. The weather's settled down now, but if you recall, it was very unsettled at the end of last week, so we'll be taking a look at the facts and figures from Storm Erik. But also, spring is in the air this week.
A whiff.
Yeah, the warmer air is wafting our way, so we'll be taking a look at how long the warmth will last, how warm it might get this week, and whether winter is definitely over or could it have a sting in its tail. Something else that's in the air this week, romance.
Oh, I thought you'd never mention it.
Yeah. You know me, I'm the office romantic, so I have prepared
That is true.
a romantic place names quiz. You'll definitely want to stick around for that.
I can hardly wait. Exciting. Please do get in touch, though. Please let us know what you think is the first signs of spring. What do you feel really signifies spring? Because we'll be looking at that a little bit. So let us know that. Get in touch. Ask us your questions. Please do. We are live on Periscope. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. So lots of ways to watch, lots of ways to get in touch. Please give us a thumbs up. Let us know you like it. You can subscribe to us on YouTube, both this channel and our Learn About Weather sister channel as well. And do send your questions in. Even if you're not watching this live, keep sending your questions in, because sometimes, like we're going to do now, we answer questions from last week. So last week, Daniel Watson Marsh asked on Facebook, should I give up on Winter and the Beast? Beast from the East, I'm guessing he's talking about there. And Weebs on YouTube asked, is there a way to tell when the polar vortex will return to normal? Great questions. Thanks for sending those in. Aidan, polar vortex, where are we at with that?
Well, if you have been following the Weather Studio through the last few months, we were talking about the polar vortex at the end of last year. There was that strong signal for the polar vortex in the stratosphere above the North Pole to break down. What does that mean? Very cold air, high in the sky above the North Pole, and a wind circulation surrounding it through the winter months occasionally gets disrupted. And the signs were that we would have something called a sudden stratospheric warming, and all of that would mean that cold air locked above the North Pole would affect other parts of the Northern Hemisphere. And of course, we saw that happen. We saw very cold air in North America, if you remember that. And we've also seen a few cold spells here in the UK. Now, actually, that polar vortex in the stratosphere above the North Pole has returned to normal. So that means that the cold air is now locked back in place above the North Pole. Now, the impacts for our weather when that happens typically are that the jet stream is a little bit more enhanced by the wind circulation that surrounds that intensely cold air in the stratosphere above the North Pole. But there's a lag effect. So at the moment, the jet stream's a little bit in a muddle. And of course,
so the jet stream has been weaker. It's been weaker through January, which is one of the reasons why we haven't seen many storms around. So that was the impact from the southern stratospheric warming. SSW, of course, doesn't always lead to a beast from the east. It's only a certain percentage of times that's what happens. But it has had an effect on our weather over recent weeks for sure. And there's always that lag. So for at least the next couple of weeks, the jet stream does tend to, at the moment, still look fairly weak. And so blocking pattern is going to be in place. But whether we get an easterly or not, it doesn't look likely at the moment. We'll have more on that later on.
Yeah, last week is all about the westerlies, wasn't it?
Yes, because we were looking west for our winds last week.
We did have a strong jet stream, which helped to develop an intense area of low pressure, which was named by Met Erin, the Irish Met Service, as Storm Erik. And beautiful from space, this was the image on Friday last week. You can see the centre of the storm just off the west of Scotland, and wrapped around that, this big swirl of cloud.
It is a gorgeous satellite picture. One of the ironies, isn't it, storms, actually, because, I mean, they obviously cause serious problems like this one did, but it's just so gorgeous to look at a satellite picture like that. Such a huge swirl, beautiful swirl, classic cold front clearance there, and then all these dots, these are like the cotton wool, the convection, the showers following on behind. A great image. But
there were two areas of very strong winds associated with this. There was one on that cold front that went through parts of England and Wales, and then there was another area that just came in on the south of the area of low pressure across Ireland. That's why Met Erin named Storm Erik, and then that pushed into parts of Scotland as well. So
It was Friday and Saturday, really. We were seeing gusts quite widely across the UK of 50, 60 miles now. Strongest gust was at Capel Curig. That's a high site in North Wales. But there, just backing up, it was the first storm we've had, the first named storm since Deirdre back in December. And there was evidence of line convection on the cold front. That's where you suddenly get squally winds and intense rain on the back edge of an active cold front. And that's what really suddenly whips the winds up all of a sudden. Line convection, for more on line convection, actually, there's a really good explainer on our sister channel, Learn About Weather. You can find out just exactly what line convection is on that, and we'll put a link in the description.
And sudden stratospheric warming.
And sudden stratospheric warming, yes.
Mentioned.
Yeah, both of those things.
On that
Video explainers on there. So that was Storm Erik, and yes.
A couple of questions have come in.
Have cleared up a little bit and eased down. High pressure is now back in charge. So we've said goodbye to Erik. But still going to be quite windy, actually, although nothing severe at this stage. It's still going to be quite blustery across the northwest through the rest of today.
Mild winds, though. Judith in Malvern on Facebook has let us know that snowdrops and crocus are out in bloom. Daft's just about to as well. Nicola Clark, first on YouTube, says, signs of spring, little daffodils starting to pop up on the grass verges, lots of birds singing in the morning.
Wow, it's beautiful.
Lovely
it's
picture for us.
Absolutely beautiful. What does spring mean to you? Laura on Facebook, a ladybird in my kitchen refusing to leave.
Must like the food, the hospitality.
That must be it. Thank you. Keep sending them in. Keep sending them in. We are going to talk a little bit about spring now because it is only February. So, spring hasn't technically started meteorologically, but there's always signs this time of year. What does spring mean to you? I came back from holiday in January and there were already lambs in the fields around us. Now, we live obviously in the southwest, so it's a milder part of the world, so lambs do tend to come a little bit earlier. But that is obviously a clear sign of spring. Just heard it there as well. Snowdrops in the garden. I've got some gorgeous snowdrops in the garden, and the daffodils are just on the cusp as well. So
yeah,
different definitions of spring. Some people don't think spring starts until you can see the blossom, but that of course can be April, May. For me, that's peak spring. That's mid-spring when you get.
What you're talking about there, of course, is the phenological spring.
Yes, yeah. Of course.
There are different definitions for spring. There's the meteorological definition, the astronomical definition, and then if you ask a gardener, they will say that spring starts at a different time every year, which is true. The weather varies every year. Nature responds in a different way every year. Last year, spring was really late because we had that cold weather all the way through March and the beginning of April. I remember these blossom sightings on trees really seemed forever before they appeared.
Meteorological spring, of course, technically starts on the 1st of March. That's when, for statistical reasons, we segment the seasons up into those 3 months. But yeah, 1st of March last year was particularly cold because the beast from the east had just arrived, or the first version of it.
So whatever definition you use, whether you like to use the astronomical one, or we won't judge, or the meteorological one, which is the correct one to use, of course, the weather will do its own thing, regardless of.
But an interesting definition, an interesting meteorological interpretation of when spring is that our colleague Claire Nazir pointed out this week. She thinks spring starts when you get convection. When you get cloud across land. We've got an example of this yesterday. So when you start to see those cumulus clouds bubbling up over land, that is for her what she thinks is the first signs of spring. And this is a classic example of it yesterday, actually. You can see the cloud streets, can't you? Lines of cumulus.
Yeah, if you just pick out East Anglia there, you can see these dotted cloud shapes, these clumpy clouds. And effectively, through much of winter, the sea is warmer than the land because the sea takes a while to cool down. The land cools down much quicker. But around this time of year, the sun gains in strength, so of course the land starts to warm up, and that's when you start to see these thermals, these rising air currents as the land heats up and these cumulus clouds developing. And that leads to this, rainbows.
Showers, rainbows.
Showers.
April, classic spring, April showers, beautiful rainbow scenes. Yeah, yes. So, yeah, we've definitely started to see the signs. We could see more this week. I mean, temperature's definitely going to rise.
Some good rainbows. On Sunday, I was out for a walk with the family. I saw the sun in front of me, and it was raining. Yeah. And I said to everyone, turn around and you'll see a rainbow. Lo and behold, there was one. Wow. First time I've ever been right when I've done that.
Back in the good books after last week when you had that fantasy trip to find some snow in South Wales.
Yeah.
Your poor
we won't
poor
mention
family.
that again.
Your poor family. But some amazing stats about February. Daylight really does increase. It really is the month. I mean, I love February because my birthday's in February. But it really is the month where you start to feel that tingle of warmth. This week, I think people really notice. It's not going to be sunny everywhere, but I think for the first time, people will really notice that tingle from the sun because temperatures will be rising. And daylight increases, of course, a lot. You know, an hour and 3/4 of daylight between the 1st and the 28th of the month. So you really notice that those evenings starting to get lighter and temperatures jumping up. So just an example there, Stoke between mid-February and mid-March goes up by 3 degrees, the average maximum. But we're going to be well above that this week, aren't we, in some places?
Yeah, we are.
It
Well
is
into
getting
the double
milder.
figures.
It is getting milder. The temperatures are on the rise this week into the teens. So as I said, you really start to feel that tingle, that first proper sign of spring coming in. Any more questions, Aidan? Oh, lots coming in.
Apple UK 123 YouTube says, "Hey Aidan and Alex, your 30-day outlook has consistently mentioned the chance of colder conditions since December, but this hasn't happened." Well, we did get colder conditions from the middle of January until the beginning of February. If you remember, last week we looked at some of the snowy pictures that we saw. We saw quite significant snow across southern parts of Britain. So
people forget, because they had the beast from the east and widespread snow last year, people forget actually how unusual it is to see, you know, widespread snow across the south. It haven't happened that often over recent winters, so it is pretty unusual.
Yeah, and there are different flavours of cold you can get in this country. It's not just widespread sub-zero Siberian air and widespread snowfall. You know, when you get what we mentioned as a sudden stratospheric warming and a weaker jet stream, you can get more northerly winds, you can get more easterly winds, or you could just have high pressure close by and some frosty nights. And so there's a statistical relationship between what happens in the stratosphere above the North Pole and what happens to our weather in the UK. But it's only a game of probabilities. It only increases the likelihood of a weaker jet stream. It doesn't guarantee it, and that's what our 30-day outlook consistently reflected. It's the increased chance of colder conditions. We saw some of that. It didn't guarantee freezing easterlies.
No. But yeah, thanks for sending in questions. Do keep them coming in. Keep your flavours of spring coming in as well. It was freezing and very cold last night. So I had my heating on most nights. So where is the warmth? It's on its way, Deborah Welsh. Thank you for that question through Periscope. Yes, it was cold last night, and the nights, you know, this time of year is still long enough, and there will still be some pockets of frost. But it's by day when we'll really start to notice the power of the sun and things warming up a little bit, and that's what's happening here. All thanks to our friend the jet stream.
Yep, it's pushing well to the north of the UK at the moment. This is Tuesday afternoon, and look at this. As a consequence, we've got these warmer colours wafting our way from the southwest. So if we just run that forward through the rest of Tuesday into Wednesday, the impact isn't immediate. The temperatures will slowly warm up over the next few days, and it's really Thursday, Friday that those temperatures will peak.
So the UK is in here, the jet stream is driving south here, the cold air is dipping south across the mid-Atlantic, and another really cold plunge. We've got quite amplified pattern across the Atlantic, across Western Europe at the moment. But notice the jet stream is tending to push that warmer air across the UK, the colours rising, colours changing as the warmer air pushes in, but it's also pushing across much of mainland Europe as well, isn't it? So again, it goes back to what we talked about. If we got an easterly wind, at the moment it's not that cold over there, is it? It would take a while for that cold air to come right back down. So at the moment, if we got an easterly wind, it wouldn't be especially cold.
So we've got high pressure centred over continental Europe. Our winds are coming up from the south, and that means, yes, they will be drawing up that warmer air, but it's also places that are to the north of higher ground that will perhaps get the highest temperatures through Thursday and into Friday. So this is Friday, and you can see with the winds coming in from the southwest there, it's likely to be northeastern parts of Scotland, northeastern England, also North Wales. That's where the highest temperatures will be later this week, 14 or even 15 degrees in those spots, because the wind will be bouncing off the hills and it will be warming up over the hills as it does so.
A subtle shift in that high pressure, and this is what we call a blocked pattern as well, with the high pressure there, so the Atlantic fronts can't come in across the UK. They can't bring the wind and the rain because the high pressure is holding on, and it looks like generally the pattern will be blocked into next week with high pressure nearby. But crucially, it's the position of that high that dictates which way the wind's blowing across the UK. Now, if that high is just a little bit further north, then we'll get the winds coming around from the east, and that's what could happen next week, more from the southeast. And although the air will still be warm, we could get a cold feed from the continent, because the continent, although it will be warming a little bit, the air across it, the continent is still very cold. The ground itself is still very cold, whereas out here you've got a mass of water that's still warm. So a subtle difference between a southwesterly wind, which will bring mild air, and just a slight shift in the wind direction, which could bring very cold air. And that's, we're talking about next week, we're talking 5-6 days away, so that it's kind of in the balance. There's kind of a battleground going on.
Got a question about that, actually, because you mentioned you've got these warmer looking colours there over Central Europe, but light winds as well, because it's close to high pressure, so I imagine there'll be quite frosty nights despite these warmer colours. This is taken at 5,000 feet in the sky, these temperatures, just so that we can ignore the effect of mountains and seas and all that difference and just see where our air is coming from. But it doesn't necessarily translate. We've got a question here from Matty B on Facebook. When the upper air temperatures show warmer weather, is it still possible for colder ground temperatures? Not necessarily the case at the end of this week, because you'll see the closeness of the isobars there. It means it will be quite windy, and that helps to stir the warmer air from high up, which is represented by the colours here, down below. So it's going to be mild on Friday. But if you subtract all those isobars, if you effectively had what you've got across continental Europe, light winds, and if you had clear skies, then you still have frosty nights and perhaps temperatures not quite as high during the day. So yeah, it doesn't always tally up with it.
Good. Excellent. Good questions. Lots of questions coming in this week. Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. Gaza, Sweden, on YouTube says, Alex, you mentioned your birthday was coming up in last stream as well. Well, firstly, Gaza, thank you for watching.
We talk about it every day.
Thank you. I'm reasonably consistent. That's what I like about that. Thank you for that question. Will the cold plunge over Washington deflect the jet stream even more? Well, yes, that will have an impact. Good question, Matty B again on Facebook. Yes, we've talked about that before. Again, the cold plunge across the US. There's a bit of a winter storm going on there at the moment, not as severe as the one a couple of weeks ago, but it does have an impact. That cold air pushes south and it hits the warmer air, and that pushes the jet stream further north. That's what creates the amplification. It makes things quite slow moving across the UK, but it's just a subtle shift in that. It means a subtle shift in the high, which means a subtle shift in the surface winds, which is crucial to the weather that we get. So yes, it does have an impact.
Yeah.
Aidan.
Quiz time.
Beautiful.
Quiz time. Just to let you know, I've put more thought into this Valentine's Day quiz than I have for Valentine's Day itself, my wife.
I'm honoured. I'm honoured. I'm not sure your wife would be too pleased about it. So what is this quiz? Talk me through it.
There are some very romantic place names in the UK.
Right.
Of course, people living in those places, I'm sure, make an extra effort on Valentine's Day. They will want to know what the weather is doing on Valentine's Day. So I'm going to read out a few place names.
Right.
And I'd like you to tell us what the weather will be.
Romantic place names.
OK, here we go. So the first place, so this is 7 o'clock on Thursday. And
what's your table booked for? 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock?
Yeah, 7.
The most romantic thing is to stay in, I think, on Valentine's Day, but that's just my opinion.
I'm going out tonight, actually.
Oh, you're for Valentine's?
Yeah, just because childcare is possible on Tuesday night, and that's how romantic we are.
Well, it should be every night. It should be every night of the year, shouldn't it?
It is. It is. Sweetheart Abbey.
Sweetheart Abbey.
What's
There's
the
a place
weather
called
doing?
Sweetheart Abbey. Is that in Yorkshire?
Tell me what the weather's doing.
Tell you what, well, I don't know where it is.
It's not in Yorkshire, no. It's in Dumfries.
Dumfries. It'll probably be quite cloudy and breezy, I would have thought. Yeah, okay.
Yep,
Yeah,
spot on.
6 degrees. Might get a spot of drizzle, but I wouldn't have thought so. But breezy, dry, cloudy, 6 degrees. Quite mild. Yeah?
I love you.
I love you too, Aidan, but let's get on with the quiz.
I love you.
No, I know, I love you.
It's an island.
Okay, the Isle of You.
I love you. I love you.
Is that in the Western Isles?
Close. Yeah, I guess it is.
One of the Western Isles.
Yeah.
So it could be rainy there. There's a front nearby. It's certainly going to be windy there. Blustery. Maybe 8 degrees. Oh, 9 degrees.
Right there, west coast of
going for dry.
Ross and
dry.
Cromarty.
Might get a few spots of rain.
Only a single family live there, apparently. The Grants. They live in I Love You.
Okay,
Cupid's Hill.
Cupid's Hill. Is that in Kent? Devon?
No.
This could go on all day.
Monmouthshire.
Monmouthshire. Well, it should be also dry there, a bit breezy, but not too bad. The wind's reasonably light, and temperature, I'm going 10. Ooh,
colder.
Wow.
Clear skies.
I guess the clear skies, yeah.
And it's in the hills, so...
Yes, okay, I guess that's a good point. Clear skies. Romantic, though. Romantic with the moon and the stars.
Lover.
Like the way you look at me when you say that, Aidan. Lover, where is that? The Midlands?
No.
There's an actual town called Lover Village.
There is, yeah.
Wiltshire.
Technically, it's not pronounced lover, it's pronounced lover, like Dover.
Wiltshire?
It is, yeah. Well done.
And, well, it'll be getting chilly there under clear skies as well, so it's probably about 6 or 7. Oh, 5 degrees, clear, fine, starry nights.
These are all places in the countryside, you know, they're not major
No, I guess
conglomerates.
not. Is this it? Is that it, or is there one more?
There's one more.
Okay.
Lovesome Hill.
Lovesome Hill. Yorkshire? We've got to have one in Yorkshire, haven't we?
Yeah.
Lovesome Hill, clear spells. 7
Near
degrees.
Northallerton. In North Yorkshire.
Fantastic. So, yeah, basically, if you've got plans for Valentine's night, the weather should be
good.
dry.
It's
It
like
will be
nice.
breezy in the west, quite gusty in the far northwest, a spot or two of rain, but actually reasonably mild.
And our thanks to Ordnance Survey, who compiled these romantic place names in a very interesting blog. You can find that online.
Excellent, excellent. I'm sure there's been a lot of feedback on that feature. Let's get some more questions in. Is the cold on the left and the country sets coming our way? I was talking about the dip in the jet stream and that cold air across the Atlantic, where it doesn't necessarily work like that. It doesn't all continue to move around the jet stream and get what's called a cut-off, and the jet stream will just cut off that colder air, and actually we don't get it. So no is the short answer to that. It doesn't look like we're going to get any cold from the Atlantic in the forecast. There are signs as we go into next week that depending on where that high builds, we could get some colder air back from the continent, but it's only a small chance at this stage. Most of the models signalling that it'll stay reasonably mild well into next week. But we'll have more on that in just a moment, won't we?
What's the weather doing on Saturday in Newcastle, Carol asks, because her daughter's getting married. Actually, it looks pretty good for February. You know, you're not going to guarantee sunshine in February, but it's looking reasonably decent, dryish, fair amount of cloud in the sky, but doesn't look particularly unsettled on Saturday. We've still got that high pressure sticking around, by and large, especially across southern and eastern Britain into the weekend. Let's just
Let's have a look at the weather for next week, or the weekend and into next week.
So we've still got that jet stream riding high over the UK as we go through Friday. Friday, remember, is the warmest day of the week. If we put on the temperatures there, you can see the warm air across many areas, but then it gets pushed away. There is a change into the weekend, not for everyone, but it does look like we'll start to see the influence of this area of low pressure. It comes closer to many areas through Saturday, and what does that mean? It means that the winds will pick up into the west. It means that the cloud will thicken, and we'll see more rainfall coming into western Britain through Saturday. You can see this weather front. Now,
Zoom in a bit on that.
Yeah.
And then we can... There we go. There we go. So, yeah, the isobars squeezing together this weather front. Don't take this as read, this weather front, because there's still a few days off and it could be a little bit slower, it could be a little bit faster, depending on the interaction with that high pressure. But it does look as if finally this weather front will bring some wet weather into the west during the weekend.
it slows down, though, because it runs up against that high pressure. So this is midday Sunday, and you can see how it really staggers more or less to a halt. The rainfall is mainly affecting Scotland, western parts of England, Wales, Northern Ireland as well. Eastern areas cling on to the dry weather, at least for much of the weekend. But it is fairly breezy, and if we put on the temperatures again, then you can see that the warmth is being pushed slightly away. But beyond next weekend, that high pressure that we are talking about out to the continent, it looks like it will still influence our weather through next week. There's just some uncertainty in terms of how it will influence. There are some computer simulations that have it close to the south of the UK, and we continue to see mild air come in from the Atlantic, a lot of cloud and that sort of thing. But then there are other simulations that have it closer to the east of the UK, and if that happened, then we'll start to see a chillier southeasterly breeze. Not a beast from the east by any means, but it would mean that we'll have some more frosty nights and that sort of thing. But with high pressure close by, it looks like the weather won't be desperately unsettled through next week.
No, it's a bit of a battleground going on, the classic old battleground, and then we'll have more on this tomorrow, the 10-day trend. We'll be recording the 10-day trends tomorrow, so that'll be on Facebook and on YouTube tomorrow afternoon, Wednesday afternoon. Lots of other ways you can stay up to date with the very latest from the Met Office, of course, Facebook, YouTube, our sister channel, Learn About Weather, which has the Southern Stratospheric Warming Explainer, and that explainer I talked about earlier about line convection. We're on Twitter, obviously, Snapchat as well as Instagram. And a new podcast will be going out tomorrow, Weather Snap, our weekly podcast, which this week talks a little bit about the dangers again in Scotland. We talked about this here last week as well, but the avalanche risk has increased and become over a larger area across Scotland, particularly important at the moment because it is half-term in parts of Scotland. And speaking of half-term, as half-term seems to go on for the next 3 weeks, depending on where you are, next week, what we'd really like is some questions from children. So if you're on half-term next week or on half-term now watching this, you're on half-term next week, please get your kids interested in weather. Send us some questions. We'd love to answer some questions from children for half-term next week. And I think it's the week after in Wales as well. It's different parts of the country.
Just write them in the comments.
But write them in the comments, yeah. Even if you're not watching this live, write them in the comments. We do go through them, and so we'll try and answer some of those questions about that. But yeah, the podcast will be going up tomorrow as well. But that's probably about it, is it? I think we've got all for this week. But
for now.
Yes, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.